An absolutely outstanding value timepiece from Orient, made in Japan, that will give run for their money not only to established brands but also to some micro brands. However, the outstanding value for money is not the only reason I bought this watch for the channel. As a matter of fact, it's not even the main reason. So let's get on with unboxing. Hi and welcome to the channel. If you're already subscribed, thank you and very warm welcome back. And if you're new here, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It does help us to bring you more reviews. When we look for a top-spec device that represents solid value for money, at least in recent years, the emerging micro brands are usually where we turn to. And we are prepared to look past the absence of any brand pedigree, because we know that if an established brand will include some of the little luxuries like sapphire crystal, solid end links, bracelet and strong lume, it will easily push the price north of $500. And if we are to add to it ISO diver certification and in-house movement, which hand winds, and a complication other than date, then things get really out of hand. That's why, in my opinion, this Orient Triton stands out among the competition in its price segment, which is quite competitive and is quite crowded, to say the least. Established in Japan in the 1950s, Orient still manufactures their own in-house movements, which are only used for Orient watches, and in recent years they became part of Seiko Epson Group. And for whatever reason, this Triton bears a resemblance to the now discontinued Seiko SKX, and this is a good thing in my opinion. However, make no mistake, this Orient Triton definitely has a personality of its own. Okay, it is unboxing, so let's have a look what we get inside the box and then talk about the price. Well, once we remove the outside cardboard box, we are presented with the actual watch box. The box feels nice and premium. It is kind of leatherette, I guess, feels nice to touch and is quite solid, but not over the top. Opening the box and we are presented with the watch on a black cushion. Let's put it aside for a moment, and here we find warranty booklet and the user manual. The watch is nicely wrapped and of course it has a tag attached. I bought this watch from Amazon UK because I wanted to get it in for review as soon as possible, and I paid £315 for it, which is about $425 US. The price tends to fluctuate, and actually the best price I could find so far was on JOMASHOP. Here is the listing on JOMASHOP. Somehow they still managed to sell it for about $325 US. And if you are in the USA, then I think there is a free shipment option available as well. And even for customers outside the US, this is a pretty sharp price. I will leave the links to Amazon and JOMASHOP in the description. The MSRP for this watch stands at about $700 US, so in my opinion, if you can get it for the current price, it is a pretty sweet deal indeed, especially taking into the account that this Orient diver uses the same movement as now discontinued Orient Saturation Diver, a quite popular watch which was priced at about $2,000. This watch comes in three colorways: black, blue and two-tone black with gold accents, the one I have here. There are a few reasons for choosing this colorway. First, the price and availability. This colorway was available with the next day delivery from Amazon UK, and it was also priced ever so slightly lower compared to other two versions at the time. The second reason, because the same colorway is also available from JOMASHOP, and I wanted to see how the watch actually looks in person, so to speak. And the third reason for getting this colorway, it seems like the two-tone watches are gaining a bit more popularity these days, so let's see how this one plays out. I think it will look good on a waterproof leather strap with yellow accents. This is something I might try in a follow-up review. Dimensions. Okay, 3 to 9 o'clock, the case measures about 43 mm, the bezel though is 42 mm, the case height is 14 mm, lug width is 22 mm, lug tip to lug tip is about 51 mm, and because we have a combination of U-shape inwards end links and a slightly curved down lugs, the watch sits quite nicely on the wrist. It is not a small watch, and I like how it sits on my about 7-inch wrist. However, for guys with slimmer wrists, I will throw a shot of this watch on the 6¼ inch wrist later in the video, so you can decide for yourself. Bracelet tapers down only slightly from 22 mm down to 20 mm at the clasp, and clasp is about 21.5 mm wide. The full-length bracelet should cover about 8.5 inch wrist, or about 21.5 centimeters, and on a fully supplied stainless steel bracelet this watch weighs 210 grams, nice and chunky. This is something to keep in mind as well, of course, because it comes about 50 grams over what we would consider a Goldilocks weight for a sports watch of 150 grams. However, for a diver, even though it is chunky, it will be quite on par with other professional divers out there, including Seikos. A big part of that weight is in this nice and chunky bracelet, so if you put it on a rubber strap or leather strap, you are most likely to get rid of about half of that weight. Dial. This is quite a unique dial to some degree, and it has its own personality. We have a nicely applied indices, what looks like a multiple layers of lume framed with a high polished gold rings, a power reserve indicator, and quite unusually positioned date at 4 o'clock. Power reserve indicator is probably one of my favorite complications, especially on a dive watch where we need to unscrew the crown to wind it up, and also if you have more than one watch in rotation like myself. Also, of course, it is a very useful complication on a tool watch like this diver. The power reserve indicator is slightly recessed, and because of its location, Orient moved the logo to the bottom side of the dial, which makes things slightly crowded around 6 o'clock. However, there are no other wordings on the dial, so I think it's okay. There is a minute track on the rehaut. We have a nice and long stretching all the way to the edge of the dial second hand, an arrow hour hand, and a sword minute hand. The hour and the minute hands are brushed, and I was a bit concerned that it could affect the legibility. However, it's not the case. The hands are very legible and still reflect and play in the light quite nicely. And this watch has bags of lume. A lot of reviewers reckon it is on par with Seiko SKX lume. And by the way, even a little power indicator hand is lumed. Crystal. Orient went with sapphire crystal, which I think is great. We also have an anti-reflective undercoating. The crystal is nice and flat. This is a nice change from Seiko divers in the same price range of $300 to $400, where Hardlex, a kind of mineral glass equivalent, is usually the best we can hope for. Looking at the bezel, we have 120 clicks unidirectional bezel. It is aluminum insert bezel with 12 o'clock luminescent pip. I like that pip is set in the bezel, reducing the chance of its being knocked off or scratched. The bezel grip is comfortable, the resistance is just right in my opinion. The action is a bit strange though, there is a very little back play, however, the sound and the ratchety feel is a bit soft. Not sure that I would call it mushy, but definitely not as crisp. Being an ISO certified diver as well as meeting the so-called JIS, Japanese Industrial Standard, I have little doubt in the quality of the engineering of this bezel. However, the fact remains, it is not the crispiest action bezel I came across. Here's how it sounds. Mine aligns perfectly, which is good. In general, Orient bezels tend to align more often than not, again, unlike some other divers in the same price range. Moving on to the case, nice polishing. Well, the general finishing of the case is done pretty well. The top of the case is brushed, and I like the transition to the polished sides. Now, it is when you inspect these watches up close and personal, you can actually observe the difference in finishing compared to the cheaper watches. We can see the consistency and quality of high polished and brushed surfaces. The lugs are drilled, a nice touch and always a welcome feature on a diver. The case does look very much like Seiko SKX, and I personally really like it about this watch. Really, this is probably what SKX should have evolved into rather than so-called 5KXs, in my opinion anyway. We have a screw-on back case. I like the engraving on the back case. It is very prominent, with strong lines depicting Orient logo on the wave background. The screw-down crown is well proportioned, in my opinion, easy to grip and operate. It also features an Orient logo, which I think is done quite nicely as well. And of course, this is an ISO-certified diver with 200 meters of water resistance, which is indicated by the wording Divers 200M on the dial, whereby the word Divers indicates the actual ISO certification and 200M is the depth. This watch has an in-house Orient caliber 40N5A automatic movement inside, which has date and a power reserve indicator complications. The movement beats at 21,600 beats per hour, the movement hacks and winds and has a 40-hour reserve, and also has a claimed accuracy of +25, -15 seconds a day. However, reportedly, it usually comes more accurate than that. And as an icing on the cake, this movement is usually reserved by Orient for watches priced well above $1,500. So let's pop it on a time grapher. Yep, that is quite healthy. Bracelet. Solid links and very little taper, only 2mm, hence it is quite a chunky bracelet. On one hand it creates an extra weight, on another though it acts as a counterbalance to the watch head, making sure it's not top heavy. The result of course is that the watch is heavy all around, so something to keep in mind. Looks like we have push pins links here, which is fine. I like the inward end links, it is usually the best option if we want the watch to fit various wrist sizes. I also like fully brushed solid links, they kind of look like a three-piece. However, at the close inspection, it is actually a single-piece link. The links are polished on the sides, which gives the watch a slightly premium look, yet not making the polished surfaces the scratch magnets at the same time. Moving on to the clasp, Orient gave us a pressed clasp here, which is acceptable at this price point in my opinion, especially taking into account other premium features we get on this watch. And to be fair, Seiko only starts to supply milled clasp as we get over $1,000 price point. Other than being pressed, it is a fully functional diver's watch clasp. We have 4 micro adjustments, it has double push with a secure lock mechanism, and we have a diver's extension. Of course, we have an Orient logo engraved on the clasp. Not the deepest engraving, I've got to say, but nice to have nevertheless. Okay, the good, the bad, and well... Okay, I think I covered most, if not all the complaints, and should have done better points so far. None of them were showstoppers, like pressed clasp, a bit less crispy than I expected sounding bezel, and well, that's about kinda it. And if we list positive, the list will be way too long, and it will culminate at the price point of about $330 that this watch can be currently bought for. However, I did mention at the beginning that the absolute value for money that this watch represents was only one, but not the main reason for this watch purchase. Well, here is the main reason. I actually was looking to buy a now discontinued Seiko SKX, and this Orient Triton, which can be purchased pretty much for the same price, and it has a similar crown arrangement at 4 o'clock and a lot of SKX's cues, plus all the extra features like sapphire crystal, hacking and hand-winding movement, with power reserve complications, signed crown to top it up. This Triton really became the best SKX alternative in my opinion, or possible SKX incarnation in my eyes if you like. So what do you think? If you could only have one, either an iconic SKX or this Orient Triton, which one would you choose? Please let us know in the comments, and of course if you find this review helpful, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and as always, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.